Hey, so last IG post, we talked about relatively five, we could argue that it's four, that different categories that you can use to somehow quantify, qualify, and create actionables in terms of recovery. When we talk about recovery, the first question that is really very important to ask is recovering from what? Okay? There's different things that we have access to that will address and create potential desirable adaptations to systems, whereas others don't. So if we cannot say what we are trying to recover from, it's very, very difficult to apply a particular choice or strategy. To suggest that, well, we're going to do a lot of gentle mobility work and we're going to call that we're doing a recovery day. Gentle mobility work can be a very, very good thing, but are you actually answering what it is that you are trying to recover from? You could even just assume that it's recovering from something without actually objectifying it. That's not wrong. You're allowed to pick whatever you want. But to just say that, well, we're going to just go in the sauna, or we're going to use some cockamamie cold chamber, or whatever it is that you may be doing, what is it that you are recovering from? What is the cost of your excellent training that you're looking to mitigate, that you're looking to get out of faster? We got bigger and stronger from our training, but because we understand what it is that we're doing, we also had to pay for that bigger and stronger with this muscle soreness or muscle damage, or autonomic nervous system was loaded in one direction to accomplish what we wanted. I think it's important that we say those things. The other thing that's very, very important is to actually, just like if we say we're bigger and stronger, well, how do you know? Well, because you have bigger arms on a tape measure, or you bench press more weight, or you run faster or jump higher. You have ways to measure, did your training actually do what you said it did? So when you sit in a sauna for a little while, and which is a very, very good thing to do, and you're saying you're doing that for recovery, the next question we should ask is, well, did it move the marker that I was using in the first place? And we said that those markers can come from 5 or 4 different places: subjective, objective, testing, technological, and medical. So I think what we'll do is at least 4 videos talking about a sample of something that would live in each of those categories. And we'll start off with subjective. Going back to the other video, everything has advantages, and everything has drawbacks. The big thing with subjective is that it's very, very easy to do functionally. Clearly, you need somebody to communicate and somebody to communicate back. That may not always be as easy as we might think it is, particularly when individuals think that it is an infringement on their privacy. If that's what they think, it's probably a good idea to back off. That being said, they also have to tell the truth. They actually have to take these questions seriously so that you have the information to potentially act on in their best interests. If they don't think that you have their best interests, probably not going to do it. If they have questions and you don't have the answers, and you're not willing to dig in and communicate and play volleyball a little bit, probably not worth it. That these are things that can be easy, but they may also be challenging in other areas. Now, the big part of subjective is even when you run the best models, it doesn't really tell you how to recover. It might just tell you if you need to recover. There are two ways in my experience that we've used subjective models, other than just simply communicate and be like, hey, how you doing today? Which is very, very valuable, actually. We've used subjective questionnaires that really just act as a screen. They really just get you into the next step, the next place to discuss where the person is at with these different categories, such as soreness, such as mood, such as these global mechanisms that are actually all asking the same thing. They're just looking to get you in the door. They're not really complicated. They just don't tell you what to do, because if somebody were to say they're very, very stressed and irritable, it may be because their knee hurts, not because they have this deep-seated psychological issue or they're angry at some of their teammates, etc. The piece that we're going to talk about here is using rate of perceived exertion, and there's a lot of different directions we can go with that. But let's start talking about rate of perceived exertion, and the first step is you have to use a scale, and that scale, there's different ones, and different people have opinions. Just use the same one and see what happens. Sometimes people will say, well, if you're using colors and numbers and words, it can't possibly be valid, but other situations, they're just numbers, and then the how many numbers and where. So there's lots of different options that you can use, and I think as long as you use the same one over and over again to see if your data is real, then I think you have a good option. And when I say real, I mean valid. Sometimes you just gotta have to watch it go. In a really brilliant scientific environment, you don't really intervene. You're just looking for the truth. So if you're doing normal sets of interventions, then do that. But don't speak to the data. Don't do anything different. Otherwise, you're not really going to know if these metrics actually told you what you were asking them to tell you. So sometimes when you do real science, you have to sit back and just watch it all happen. And sometimes there's undesirable things, but now you know the truth that environment X brings out undesirable qualities in the subsequent environment. So you have to have a scale, and let's just say you're using a version of the Borg scale that has numbers of 1 to 10. Okay, so on this chart here, we're going to say that over here is 0 and here is 10. Okay, so 0 is no work at all, meaning that they did not perceive any exertion. Like this was, I just stood here and talked. And even for me to sit here and talk, I would probably call that above a 0. Okay, 10 would be the absolute most devastating, incredible level of exertion that if I had to go any harder or was asked to do anything more, I would have fallen out. I would have collapsed and I would be unable to work. Most people have no idea what a 10 is. For this scale to be valid and the individual is grounded, which I think is a term that we should feel good with using, we have to kind of know what a 10 is. We could argue, well, do you actually have to live through a 10 in order to know what a 10 is? I think that answer might actually be yes. You might actually have to do that, meaning it's a maximal test in the yo-yo or the beep test. It's a bench press, where you absolutely, if there was 1 pound weight more on the bar, you would not have achieved this. Or even a 10 would be when you didn't achieve it, where you gave maximal effort and it went the other way and got pinned. You have to know what a 10 is. So if you don't know what a 10 is, it might be challenging to validate this kind of data. So when you have 0 to 10, and then let's just say over here is person A, person B, person C, and person D. Let's just say that that this training session, this is where everything starts, because there's a number of ways you can go with this. But A said that this was a 6, B said it was a 6, C said it was a 2, and D said it was an 8. That's more like a 10. So is that possible? Yes, because everyone has a different perception, rate of perceived exertion. So what does this mean? Well, basically, this person could not have worked any harder. They said it was a 10. This person thought the workout was very easy, and these two thought it was, whatever. It was not the end of the world. It was a 6. So how do we put that into perspective? The first way to look at this in a very, very easy way, because you can couple these numbers with other metrics that you do have access to, but ultimately, you're the coach, and you know what that workout was because you controlled the workout. You controlled practice. You knew it was a hard practice. You knew it was a medium practice. You knew, but as the coach, you now have to be grounded to the 0 or the 10. You can do this in general fitness. You can do this in high levels of fitness. Most importantly, I think it needs to happen in sport coaching, because I don't know the drills that need to happen in order for us to win a championship. What I do know is that all of the energy that we use to do sport practice comes out of the same energy that we use to train. It comes out of the same energy that individuals have to deal with other aspects of their life, and it's all fueled by the same energy that we eat and or how we sleep. So as the coach, you should know what number that practice was or that training session was. So let's say that when you wrote it up and when you were done, whatever changes that you made as a coach, you said it was a 6. So you're probably a pretty good coach because 2 out of your 4 athletes or individuals training agreed with you. That means you got what you thought was ideal. Now, of course, we're looking at what we did yesterday. We're looking at what you're going to do tomorrow. We're looking at what you're going to try and do next week or when the next game is. All of those things come into play, but when you decided that it was going to be a 6, then these guys agreed. That means you, in your mind, because you're managing all of their biological resources, these 2 folks are right on point and they're where they need to be for whatever the next step in the process is of development, of stimulation, of training, of preparation, however you want to look at this. But now what about C, okay? C has this huge gap. We said that C, we said these guys were 6, we said he was a 10, and we said she was a 2. Well, we now have a big gap here. That means that this individual is one of 2 things, one of which we'll get to at the end. But ultimately, if this young lady thought that the training session was a 2 and coach said it was a 6, well then we missed an opportunity to really help this athlete or this individual improve or meet their goals. We missed a huge opportunity of intensity, of load, of demand because they only thought it was a 2. Now, that was it really a 6? Well, here's the thing. When you do this a lot, different people perceive different things. So when we think there's a 5, 6, 7, something that's of interest, but this person always says it was a 2, that just might be her way of saying it's really a 6. We have to have a stream of data. We have to have a stream of data points in order to know where people are really grounded at. But ultimately, if this person is up and down and they have a lot of deviation, and she really believed that session was a 2, we missed a huge opportunity to help them get better. Does that mean that the next session we go harder? Maybe, maybe not. In a team setting or a group setting, it's challenging. It's challenging to individualize intensities and training load for individuals. But ultimately, it's important to know where this person was recovered better than you thought. These person were right on target. She was better recovery. This individual was the opposite. If they said it was a 10, meaning it was the hardest thing they ever could possibly do, but you thought it was a 6, well, I don't know. Maybe they're injured. Maybe they didn't sleep well. Maybe they're just out of shape. Maybe they're lazy. If they were lazy, I'm not sure they would call it a 10. But all of those things look very, very similar. So we now need to have deeper communication with that individual to understand what's going on and why did they think my 6 was really a 10. So you got 3 different options. And look, if this was a 5 or a 7, we're probably right on target. But again, when you have a lot of data, you can run some math to see if that 5 or 7 is actually meaningful. What is the smallest meaningful difference? You need a lot of data points in order to achieve that. Now, is a 6 wrong? I'm going to say the coach is never wrong because the coach was the one that managed the training session. When we talk about technology, we may have a further level of evidence. So when we combine this subjective approach with a technological approach, we can now audit the coach. Coach, you said it was a 6, but the technology said that was the same training intensity when you said it was a 3. So do you even know what these numbers are doing? You might find that even though coach is never wrong when it comes to subjective, because when someone's subjective, it's never wrong, but it's this evolving process of understanding what these numbers really mean. So you have to do it a lot until it actually says something to you. That's why don't worry about it. Just measure it and don't do anything. That can be a very, very successful approach. Now, what else can you do? Now, you can always use these numbers. If you're using particular technology, you can get other places to validate those numbers. But if you know the time of how long that training session was, you can come up with some kind of seemingly arbitrary unit of training load that now puts the data into other perspectives. So for instance, if this training session overall took 60 minutes, now we have opportunity to say this was 360, this was 360, this was 120, and this was 600 units. So now if we look at things over a period of time, a microcycle, game to game, we're going to start to learn how well players perform, how successful athletes are, because this can always work for general population. I keep saying athletes because that's the scope in which I have used this the most. Not because it only applies to athletes, is because when I see people, I don't see them for 4 times a week most of the time. You know, sometimes, of course, and which we'll get to, because when you look at this, you're going to have to qualify all of the things that have load, not just when they're using what we think matters. We think practice matters, we think games matter, and we think what we do in the weight room or the gym matters. I think what they do at home matters as well. So one of the drawbacks of using these arbitrary units is that they only qualify this 60 minutes because this is what the training was. There could be a whole bunch of other things. Now, yeah, if they didn't sleep well over here the night before, then this number should reflect. They're adding lots of different things, and this is a drawback here. But the other thing, too, is the research that uses these numbers, depending on the how you calculate those numbers, you have good reason for cynicism. Because if we look at using these numbers and we look at acute to chronic, meaning a short period of time over a long period of time, and it's more complex than that, the numbers don't always add up to where we see injuries. And I think the reason is because this is not a complete number. It's just a guide. It's just holding hands with the training process to help understand where you should be, where you go next, maybe what if I audit what I did before and where I want to go down the road. The other thing too is I don't think these numbers continue to have grounding in different training sessions. What you do with the therapist counts. What you do in the weight room counts. What you do on the field counts. Also, like I'm saying, what you do at home counts. So if we're only going to use one of those segments because we think that matters the most, you're probably way off. And this will not give you when we look at these numbers. I think you should count the numbers and just see what you see rather than apply it to someone else's research. I don't think it adds up. We have gone back and looked backwards. We did not use these numbers to help make decisions. We went and looked back and didn't find anything in terms of correlating what we saw to acute to chronic workload ratio. Didn't see it. I think there's research that is subsequent that shows that the math doesn't add up. I don't think you should discard those numbers. I think you just should put them into your own context. So in general training population, over an 8-week training, the people that lose the most weight, you may find fall into a certain amount of units because that's what worked for them. Over time, and a lot of people, you may find that there is an adequate amount of workload. Now you know how to help the people that train twice a week versus train 5 times a week. You know how to train the people, like if they get to 8 weeks and they're still 400 units off where you see people ideally lose weight or create great blood work changes, This is science. This is like, it may not be publishable. It may not have level 1A double blind status, but you're looking to see what you did. You're looking for truths, and you're looking to see what you can repeat. And I think when we use this subjective approach, you're going to be able to find a lot of that information. I don't know that you'll always be able to know exactly what to do to help mitigate when the numbers are too high too quickly. Okay, you just have to then ask more questions, and those more questions may be subjective, but those questions probably will be asked in the form of testing or objective information, technological or medical, and we'll probably put together a video of each of those. In this context, some things that I have experience in using, but also demonstrate how they make sense and how they don't, because at the end of the day, I am certainly going to advocate, if you have a dedicated level of resources to looking at recovery in this fashion, you got to know what you're recovering from, so you pick the right tool, but you have to know if the recovery is working. This is one way to know if your recovery is working, but you may not always know why. I think you're going to need them all. You're going to need something from every category to really be dominant. I don't think you have to be dominant, particularly in the general population. But if they have a very, very hectic lifestyle, sometimes the lifestyle might actually be more demanding than what you're asking them to do in the training process. Everything is push and pull. Everything is a little bit of a dance. Let's start to put the music on paper to see really what it is that we're doing and try to understand what the individual is experiencing. So subjective RPE, 0 to 10, pick whatever scale you want. You got colors, you got numbers, you got words, but you know what it is. Coach, was that a hard practice today? Coach, what was that weight room session? Where would you categorize that? And you're not wrong. Let's just run with it and see what we can find. And if you ever happen to find anything hanging out up in that tree and you see a leprechaun, say, yeah,